Mr. Alexiam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I thank the Minister for his comprehensive response and ministerial statement. I have 3 supplementary questions. With regard to the safety timeout called this time for Corporal First Class Aloysius Pang, how does this compare to the length of time of safety timeout called for previous training incidents, and whether there were any reasons for calling for a longer or shorter timeout? I also understand that from the 7th of February, the safety timeout is progressively being lifted. With the time that has passed since the incident and the timeout was originally called for, I do hope that the SAF and the commanders will also observe as much safety precautions as possible as men catch up on the training that they've missed out during this period of time. The second question is with regards to further assuring Singaporean parents. Corporal First Class Aloysius Pang was my resident. Fellow residents in my constituency knew him well. Over the course of the last few weeks, as I visited families in their flats, as we held gatherings, many parents have come up to me and asked about safety, about reassurances for their children. But what I'm heartened by is that none of the parents that spoke to me have ever said we should do away with national service. Many of them prephrase their statement by saying that we have also served and we know that the SAF takes safety seriously. But with 4 recent incidents, they are worried. So how do we reassure them that safety is paramount, that their children will be taken care of? Lastly, I welcome Minister's announcement that rear-view cameras, reverse cameras, will be installed in the Bionics as well as the 5-tonners. I was previously with the transport section of the 328 Singapore Combat Engineers Battalion. I looked after the 5-tonners as well as other transport equipment. These equipment are huge. And although we go through vigorous training and we ensure that there's always a vehicle commander or a safety officer to ensure that when we reverse these vehicles, there are occasions where lapses do occur and minor accidents do happen, fortunately not involving human lives. So I do ask if the SAF will consider installing these cameras in all our SAF vehicles eventually, so that it takes out, it includes an additional safety element for the driver on top of all the other safety features as well as the vehicle commander and safety officers that we already practice today.
Mr. Speaker, let me take the questions in turn. How different is this timeout from previous timeout? It's significantly different. Previously, there was a period and then units would revert back to their original activity. But as the member rightly pointed out, after 4 deaths, all practices must be changed. You must start with the basis that there might be something wrong and look for that, whatever that factor is, and that's just a precaution. So the difference is operational units carry on. We had a period of safety timeout, but it's been lifted only for certain activities. More complex ones, more high-risk ones, CDF and its commanders want to be satisfied that not only are the training safety regulations are in place, but that there is adequate behavior, adequate culture in that unit before you undertake them. And I fully support them. So there isn't as if after a certain period, behavior automatically correct. Rear view cameras for all vehicles. Intuitively and in principle that makes sense, but as you can well imagine, the SAF runs platforms of various generations, and in fact the most recent generations, the Terraxes, even our Leopard tanks, have rear view mirrors. But you inherit a long tail, and the Bionics was in operation since I think the 90s, And with this incident, we decided that we will do it for training vehicles. Review also will be doing it for operational. So I would say in principle, yes, but there are other considerations, but in principle, I think that's what we want to do. And certainly, as I said, for those that need to reverse, that are reversing, will not only rear view cameras, but mirrors to reduce blind spots. There was another question of reassurance of parents. How do you reassure parents that their sons will be safe? And I'm glad what the member Alex Yam has said, that no parent has come to him to say we want to we'll do away with NS. The parents want to know that you're doing your level best and that you will pay attention. Singaporeans are reasonable. They know that we want to train. But let me give you another perspective as well. In these two incidents, and a number of incidents that I've shared in this house, I shared with you the incident of Gavin Chan, who was training overseas as well when his bionics overturned. And I gave you the findings of the COI. When asked by his crew to switch on the headlights, he said, we shouldn't do it. It will give our position away to the enemy. In the case of Dave Lee, the heat stroke, he pushed himself beyond what he was able. In this case, Lui Kai, they wanted to be realistic extrication drills. We've come very far when national servicemen say, I want to train as realistically as I can. What if we had the reverse situation, where everyone attends training but nobody trains? I think we have to take what is good in our system and respond practically. The results must be of ultimate comfort for parents. And we'll do as much as we can practically each time our COIs tell us there's a lapse or weakness that needs to be addressed. But I need, at every level, a safety consciousness, a safety culture. And I tell you, it doesn't come overnight. And it may not come even after many years to raise the level of safety culture. I've been a Minister of Manpower, and you remember a particular period, the Nickel Highway collapse, the Fusionopolis, the COIs that we had. And in order to strengthen our system, we went overseas to the Nordic countries, to some European countries which have higher standards than us. And they told me a very interesting example of a particular bridge that was built by two Nordic countries. I won't name them because the implications you explained once I shared what they showed. Nordic bridge, Nordic countries, two Nordic countries building a bridge to connect the two. Same specifications, they would meet in the middle. One country at half the number of deaths and injuries of the other country. It all comes down to culture. And who decides the culture? It's all of us, our children, our friends, our relatives. I have said very clearly in unknown certain terms that anyone can stop unsafe training. If you think it's unsafe for your buddies, for yourself, raise it up. If you think that someone is pushing beyond his means to physical harm, do so. I think that way we maintain realistic training and give comfort to our parents.
Mr. Dennis Tan.
Thank the Minister for your answers. The Minister mentioned that the commanders of units where there's some safety breaches, there will be a mark on their record. Can I ask the Minister, at what level would this be? Would it be at the battalion level, the brigade or the division formation level? And related to this, I note that the deaths, the NS training deaths in recent years have involved different vocationalists, different formation and command. And I think in some of these cases where disciplinary actions have been taken, they were taken against junior or mid-level commanders. And moreover, each COI usually does not go beyond the remit of that particular incident in question. So at what point and at what stage would the government think that it would be necessary to send a signal to the entire force when they recognize that there may be a problem at a systemic or a greater level requiring a senior officer, whether at formation, Army, SAF or beyond, to take responsibility on this? And I say this bearing in mind some examples from overseas. In 2013, a Taiwanese conscript died after being physically punished by his superiors. 4 officers were charged, and the defense minister also quit to take responsibility. In 2017, the U.S. Pacific 7th Fleet commander was relieved of his command after 4 accidents involving the 7th Fleet. And the reason given was that there was a loss of confidence in his ability to command. And at the same time, while each of these 4 incidents is unique, they cannot be viewed in isolation. And that was what was given, the reason that was given. And also, it went on, the U.S. Navy went on to say that there will be a deliberate reset of all its ships, focus on navigation, mechanical systems, and bridge resource management. Thank you.
Speaker, there were 2 main questions. One for commanders with safety lapses. And as I said, even those that don't lead to accidents will affect their performance review. And so that signal is quite clear. How high should you go up? I think we want to be careful that we do what we think works and makes a difference. And if senior leadership has to go because they have been involved or have they been derelict, then I don't think our population will stand for that. And if you think that that improves the system, push for it. But let's deal with the issue on the ground. I presented the facts as much as I can. We've had independent reviews, people outside the SAF, MINDEF, all looking into the problem. And if they decide that a change of the most senior leadership makes a difference, well, it's up to them to recommend. But for MINDEF and the SAF, we want to deal with day-to-day issues, aligning our incentives and disincentives so we get the whole system moving, and making sure that the effect is felt on the ground rather than posturing or politicking.
Mr. Vikram Nair.
I thank the Minister. I mean, as a serving NS man, I think incidents like this move us very strongly because we know it could be us or any other people serving with us. But in relation to this, I have 2 questions. In any organization like the Army, we know the work we do is inherently risky, and if any human error is made, incidents can happen. So are there any models of other armies, for example, where they've been able to achieve 0 training deaths? I think the Minister mentioned the Manpower Ministry, looked at other countries. Are there any armies we can learn from? That's the first question. And the second, if this incident is a result of, say, human error rather than systemic lapses, is there a need to halt training across the whole system? And my concern, of course, is the message we may send to our other parties who will be looking at us to see whether the Singapore Army is able to deal with adversity. And I think most serving NS men I've spoken to remain ready to serve and ready to go forward. Thank you.
And thank Vikram Nair for his reassuring comments. Can we learn from other militaries? We've looked at figures to see what the injury and fatality rates for other militaries are. And of course, we want to benchmark and make sure that we're somewhere there. But that's difficult because you can't compare like and like. Systems with conscript systems, Taiwan, Korea, they're not very forthcoming. Not forthcoming. Their data is shared in different ways, so it's not comparable. There is a military that we can sort of compare training, and that's the UK, but that's not conscript. That's regular service, and over a 10-year period, our safety records are just slightly better than theirs, but that's not a reflection. I mean, they may have different terrain and so on and so forth. I think we have to ask ourselves, where is our system at? is this a systemic flaw? And when we ask these questions, remember, as you said, so many of us here have or are serving in national service. We know what it's about. And some of you even blog your experiences when you go to NS. It is not divorced from reality where there's one group doing national service and another group just commenting on it. The very people who comment are the ones who do it every year when you go in. And you know what the reality is. And if you think that the system has degraded to a point, point out where it is and we will fix it. But if we are experiencing injuries and deaths as a result, as you say, human error, then neither should we punish indiscriminately, even those who are not involved, nor degrade what has taken years for us to achieve. That does not bring anyone any comfort or positive results. Deal with the issue, strengthen the system bit by bit, and it will take years. You know how it is with some commercial companies. Before every board meeting, they repeat the same thing over and over again, the safety instructions, they tell you where the exits are. And I was told that even in some countries, the safety officer saw some chap walking up the stairs, not using the stair rail, and says, this is a safety breach. You should use the stair rail because you can fall. We say it may be overboard, but there's a meaning to it, I think. And I think that can help. You need to have proper instructions, and each time something happens, we must be open, we review it, get independent parties to look at it, and then strengthen it. Do we want a system when everyone is afraid? You walk into a room and everyone is frightened that if anything happens, his head will chop, more heads will chop up, down. I've dealt with many organizations, both in my private life and in government. And I noticed that the best organizations run not ones which are on tenterhooks, fearful of reprisals so that they dare not do anything, and not ones that are slack. In fact, a slightly busy outfit is the best outfit. Too little, something's happened, too busy, you can. You go into any organization, you want people who are professional, who know what they do, who are conscious, who are not out just to punish, but unfairly, but to say, how do I make this system better? Because it will take time, it will take effort, and it will take the part of everybody in that organization to do so.
Mr. Chris D'Souza.
I thank the Minister for his strong statement. Indeed, we must strive to marry safety and creating a real operational environment. As a suggestion, would MINDEF consider re-employing retired officers and specialists who have operational and safety experience to train our NSFs and NSmen on what risks to look out for prior to on-the-ground missions? These retired or near-to-retirement SAF officers and specialists have a wealth of experience to share. This could be a body separate from the IGO. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, not only will we take up the suggestion, we're already doing it. And that's exactly one of the resources that we looked upon. But even that is in short supply. Retired, experienced WOs, officers. And you remember the Committee to Strengthen National Service that we started up a couple of years ago, where we wanted to put more trainers. Instead of national servicemen, we wanted to put those with experience. And that's exactly what we did. We extended the terms of service for the retired warrant officers because they serve as a valuable resource. So because of this, we have redeployed, put safety as a priority, but we will also look for other avenues where we can put more experience on the ground to help our NSmen as well as young officers build up the training and safety capabilities.
Ms. Engineer Pritam Singh.
Mr. Speaker, just two questions for... Sorry, was it you or was it me?
Mr. Pritam Singh.
Okay. Two questions for the Minister. My first pertains to the non-operational responsibilities on NS Men and NSF, such as NDP and Army Half Marathon. Some would be of the view that these could perhaps be, some aspects of organizing such events could be undertaken by the private sector, for example. And to that extent, is MINDEF, as part of this safety review, looking into the time actually NSFs, NSmen have to focus on training, maintenance, and other operational responsibilities? So that's the first question. The second one pertains to the handout that Minister gave. This was the external review panel on SAF safety, the comments on the Committee of Inquiry's preliminary findings on the death of Corporal Liu Kai. Paragraph 6, subparagraph B, states that the SAF's medical response is based on the concept of rapid evacuation to the next echelon of care. However, such a response may not be adequate when a casualty cannot be evacuated promptly, as in Corporal Louis' case. Can the Minister share why was it that he could not have been, why Corporal Louis was not evacuated promptly, even though it does state earlier in the report that even if he could have been evacuated, he probably still would have demised from his injuries?
I agree with the member that we want to be careful as we are moving in this safety journey to allow time for units to focus on safety. And if there are administrative aspects that deter them from it, then we should be prepared to relook. But this is a command decision. The CDF, the commanders, the CEOs of the units must themselves come to and decide which is the tempo. And you're quite right. For certain activities, they have relooked it. I will leave it to them to announce what they're not going to do so that it gives them enough bandwidth to focus on safety. And that's a clear response to that. For Corporal Liu's extrication, members will understand why I have not gone into details, but it was difficult to extricate.
Engineer Lee Biwa.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask Minister, just now Minister mentioned that anybody can stop training if they find that it is not safe. I would like to ask how to stop the training. Is there a hotline or is there a whistleblower hotline? How to assure them that they will not be dealt with unfairly later on if they were to report or being tekan. In fact, recently, quite a number of mothers and grandmothers came to talk to me because their son or their grandson are going into NS. So they worry about this culture. So can Minister address that, please? Thank you.
I think the reassurance is what this member of parliaments have asked in this House and what I have said. I stated very clearly there's a TSR that anyone can stop it. But on the ground, usually in activities, you have a safety officer and a conducting officer. But even the CEO of the activity, who is supervising, and the other conducting officers, if you bring it to them, we want a culture where the person can assess if safety is at risk. So on the ground, there are avenues. That's in real time. But apart from that, if there is a recurrent safety lapse or risky behavior, we have safety hotlines, which you can do so anonymously, or you can write, and we will take action. I think the message is very clear to the units after this statement. It's always been, but let me, if it needs to be clearer because of the reiteration, then remember that unsafe practices will not be tolerated.
Ms. Joan Pereira.
Minister, I met a family of a deceased soldier about 2 years ago, and his mother told me it's hard for the pain to go away. In fact, she told me it will never go away. As a mother, I felt for her, and I can understand fully her pain. I know Minister highlighted earlier about the support through grief counsellors given to the platoon mates and to the families of the deceased soldiers. However, I would like to know if such emotional and psychological support is sufficient, and if indeed more can be done to provide such support to the families. Thank you.
All of us can imagine how difficult it is for any parent and mothers to have to lose their sons. And all we can do is to pray that there will be some comfort. I've already shared how we provide relief by grief counselors, but even our efforts need to be very sensitive. Not all families can accept it at a time, but we should always just be there to offer their help and be consistently there if it's needed. This is an area which you want to retain people in, and yet you hope that you don't need their services. But we're striking that balance, and I've asked them to train a cadre of grief counselors that can have institutional memory and that can transmit and help others in this similar type of vocation be able to assist those who have been bereaved.
Anthea Ong.
Thank you, Minister. I have two questions. The first one is, when can we expect the findings of the COI on Corporate Pang's case? If there's an indication to when the findings will be released. The second is, we all know that there cannot be total safety without psychosocial safety. Could the Minister share a little bit of the elements within this safety culture we're building that relates to the psychosocial safety climate, please? Thank you.
The COI is independent, so they take as much time as they need, and I have no control of how fast or how quickly they want to conclude it. If they find that they need more information for facts, we'll give them the fullness of time that they require. But normally, as in the case of Louis Kai, it takes a number of months, from anything from 2 to 4 months. The psychosocial aspect is incredibly important. And we're not dealing with something which is esoteric. I mean, safety cultures occur in many industries. Or the need for safety, whether it's construction, heavy machinery, and the same challenges that we face in the workplace also apply to both military and civilian settings. So it is a science, and there are experts at it, and there are benchmarks, and as I said, it's this intangible of safety culture. And in these conversations, like many of you had over this Chinese New Year period, when we talk about why it is happening, and there's always somewhat a tendency to say, well, one generation is different from the other. That the Merdeka generation and the Pioneer generation is more aware of risk, because when we grew up in crossroads, it was always a run or very hazardous. But a newer generation live in a more structured environment. I don't know what the truth is. We will just have to deal with it and keep strengthening and keep tightening where we feel that it has to be, and continue to move it. And if more people buy into this safety culture, I think it will help. But cannot be dependent on that. It's very clear this is a command responsibility. Commanders will be taken to task if they ignore safety instructions or have a poor safety culture.
So is it Professor Fatima Latif?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I listened to the Minister's explanation with great interest, also being a Director of Quality, Clinical Service and Patient Safety in Emergency Medicine and Trauma. So that really has got a synergy, between the two. And the fact that the Minister mentioned that, the incorporation of safety cultural practices into the whole organization is welcome. But more than that, I think looking at the examples given by the Minister and the whole description, it is actually about human factors and human errors. So there are people who study human factor science, human factor analysis, and perhaps this is one area of focus, not just after an incident happens, but also perhaps as a preventive measure to get human factor specialists to actually study some of the more high risk. Probably you're not able to study all the activities that go on in the SAF, just as we cannot do it in medicine, but perhaps the more high risk activities that people are going to be involved in, and especially compared to medicine, you're involved with more high, heavy machinery and equipment. So how do we actually use human factor specialists to actually help us with this? Thank you.
The member has raised a very important, relevant point, and is incorporated. Some of you who will remember that the RSAF in the 90s had a spate of very difficult incidents. It was gut-wrenching. Pilots. And today, the RSAF is a far cry from that. And that's exactly what they have incorporated, where they report near misses for equipment and near misses arising from human error. They separate it because the solutions are different. All our services do it to some extent, but Army is a much larger machinery, many tens of thousands of people running around. But we've got to get that into our system at every level, and it will be up to commanders, and they are going to give it their all, because they know that this is their moral responsibility, this is their professional accountability, and this is something that we must get right.
Mr. Ng Eng Hen.
So the Minister mentioned about the Inspector General Office, the IGOs. I would like to ask the Minister, how more effective can the IGO be than the current setup? I believe we have the SSRD. What difference, how much more difference, and how much more effective it can be? Secondly, the Minister mentioned about servicemen able to report near misses or incidents. I know some servicemen, for some reasons, may not want to report some of these incidents because of unit cohesion and other matters as well. So can I ask the Minister, is there a way whether the MINDEF or SAF would maybe go directly to the servicemen to do surveys to get an overall sense of training risk, and then from there to perhaps get to be more aware of incidents that could happen on the ground?
Mr. Speaker, a member had asked about these so-called silent surveys, and we have them in a civilian settings, a mystery shopper, and yes, there's much on the cards where you do safety audits and you check. You have now hotlines that people can call in. So that will be part of the menu of things that we will have to ramp up. It already exists, but we want to make sure that it's more accessible and the message gets through. How effective is the Inspector General? Well, when the Inspector General, who is the Chief of Staff, Joint Staff, calls you, you listen, and you better listen.
Associate Professor Walter Teixeira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, I refer to the instruction given by the trainer to Corporal First Class Liu to move the Land Rover forward and to overtake the Bionics. What is known about the reasons why this instruction was given? And second, was the trainer and Corporal First Class Liu briefed on the expected maneuvers during the exercise, including the possibility of an extrication drill happening?
Mr. Speaker, I presented what the COI found, and for the first question, why he asked him to move forward, it wasn't clear to the COI, and we have to leave it to the police. That's got legal implications. Second, did Corporal Liu, was he familiar with these aspects? He's attached to an armor unit. As I said, extrication drills are part and parcel of the exercise.